I'm Jesse McLeod. I'm the program manager for SFM. We're going to start with a territorial acknowledgement. So the University of Waterloo acknowledges that much of our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our campus is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. And just in case nobody is aware, the chat can be accessed in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We're going to start off with some introductions, and then I'm going to let Adam take it away. So, Adam Vitalis holds a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a CPA certification from Minnesota. Professor Adam Vitalis of the School of Accounting and Finance brings deep experience from over 13 years in various industry roles, including senior manager at Deloitte and Touche LLP, director of enterprise risk management at U.S. Bank, and production accountant in the film and television industry. His diverse background enriches his academic research, bridging practical insights with theoretical exploration. His work has been published in various journals such as Contemporary Accounting Research, The Accounting Review, the Journal of Sustainable Finance and Investment, Auditing, a Journal of Practice and Theory, International Journal of Auditing, and Accounting Perspectives. We have Brandon Weeks with us. Brandon is the leader of Deloitte's Accounting Operations Advisory Practice in Canada and Chile. In this role, Brandon supports a dynamic team of professionals across 6 geographic regions, focusing on transforming finance functions for the future. Leveraging his financial reporting and operational accounting background, Brandon adopts a tactical and people-centric approach to help finance leaders and their teams become more effective business partners, creating capability that can flex and adapt in the face of disruption. Brandon has over 17 years of domestic and international professional service experience, working with a variety of small to large market enterprises across various industries and sectors, including both private entities and reporting issuers. Brandon is also a proud University of Waterloo SAF alumnus. He's always been a strong advocate and supporter of the school and student body, serving as an SAF Fellowship Program honoree and former Deloitte campus champion for the University of Waterloo. Guided by his passion for elevating the talent experience, Brandon also led the development of a progressive CPA pre-approved program and competency map, opening a new route for CPA students to achieve their required technical and enabling competencies in a non-traditional advisory business. And we have Jaiden Vitalis with us. Jaiden is an accomplished upper year student majoring in sustainability and financial management at the University of Waterloo. She's set to embark on her first co-op term at Deloitte this coming January. Eager to contribute her skills and knowledge, she's excited to share her experiences and insights gained in the dynamic field of sustainable accounting and finance. Alrighty. The reminder that the chat's accessible in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And Adam, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Looking forward to the conversation. So before I get started, please do ask questions. I have questions here that I can ask these two, but I'm sure that they would much rather answer your questions than listen to me. But I will start it off because I don't see any questions in there. So maybe we'll sort of do a lob out there. Can one of you describe how sustainability, financial management are interconnected? That is a little bit about what sustainability, environment, social governance, ESG topics mean in the business space.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll give it a shot. And so I think it's an important question to start with just because it's foundational. ESG to me in the business realm really refers to practices that are used to evaluate an organization's performance as it relates to their environmental, social, and governance impact. But why I say it's an important question is because, in my opinion, we sort of tend to over-rotate to the E in ESG. In fact, that's what immediately comes to mind when most folks hear the term ESG. There's a ton of focus on environmental metrics related to things like climate change strategy, energy usage, greenhouse gas emissions, carbon footprint. But I've found that a lot less attention is placed on the G, and even less so on the S. And so from a social pillar perspective, metrics like community engagement, fair pay, equal employment opportunities, and of course diversity, equity, and inclusion All of those things are crucial in my mind to value creation in any organization. And maybe just to round it off and doubling back on the G or governance, that really deals with things like risk management, ethical business practices, accounting integrity and transparency, which is top of mind for many of the folks I know on this webinar, and of course compliance are all captured there. So I think good level setting in terms of sort of defining what ESG is and the intersection of that in the business realm. It's more than just the E.
Fair enough. Jane, do you want to add to that or?
I think, yeah, I would love to just take it back a little bit, even to just talk about how it really shows the shifting mindset. So especially when I was in like high school, for example, a lot of the accounting and business courses I took, they were very focused on how can we earn revenue, how can we make money, and obviously that's still a very important consideration for businesses. But I think it's also really cool to think about how companies are starting to look beyond just how can we make as much money as possible and start to think about the impact they have in their communities, both from an environmental and a social perspective. So for me, that's really what comes to mind when I think of the importance of sustainability as it relates to finance.
Maybe I'll piggyback off of that. And we have students on here from high school thinking about going to universities soon. Why should they care about this topic? Why should students that are thinking about getting into university be impacted by this? Should care about this?
Think I can hop in here, Brandon. Feel free to add in. But I think just on a fundamental level, it's where the world is going. We've all kind of been heard people talk about sustainability in the past couple of years, especially it's gained a lot of prominence. And we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions and diversity within companies. But now we're really seeing how that starts to pick up, especially as companies start to look towards creating reports to look at their ESG metrics. So on just a very fundamental level, this is where the future of finance is heading. And so if finance and accounting is something you're looking into, you're going to be impacted by sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, this just sort of opens up an entirely new and exciting realm of opportunities and novel roles that previously haven't existed and been available to the next generation of finance professionals. And so it's an exciting time. And for everyone on this call, you've just got an expanded list and a wider aperture of opportunities now at your disposal to really find your fit and niche. And so I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Do you think, Brandon, in 10 years, that it'll be possible to have a successful career in business in this accounting finance space without having an understanding of the sustainability, the ESG topics, in this space?
I don't think so. It's so pervasive to what finance will be expected to, the role that they'll be expected to play, that I think every finance professional needs to have an appreciation of ESG metrics and how finance can really be catalysts of change and enable business strategies around ESG agendas. And so this will be a core competency for every finance professional. Now, granted, there may be some that are deeper and more versed and have more specialized roles in this area. And so the depth of knowledge, need not be the same across every finance professional, but the baseline understanding and appreciation of ESG metrics and I would say the link to corporate strategy and finance's role in supporting corporate strategy, everyone is going to have an element and bring an element of that to the table. And so somewhat embedded in your question is I also think that finance professionals can create entire careers out of a focus in this area if they do choose to go deeper here.
I see a question in the chat, but I'm going to ask a follow-on question before. What prompted this change? And I'll ask it to both of you. Why are we at this crossroads where this is so important? And what has prompted the change and why now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it a shot, Jaiden, and feel free to sort of chime in, but it's a good one. In my mind, I think we're sort of witnessing a shifting view of corporate purpose. And there's this recognition that clear value is derived when companies are managing performance of environmental and social related issues. And so this has created demand for transparency and accountability. And so some of this is definitely driven by investor demand and stakeholder pressures, particularly for consistent, comparable, and transparent ESG and climate related disclosures. And of course, wherever there are emerging issues, the regulators are not far away, and so regulatory bodies, have recognized the growing importance around ESG and climate-related disclosures, and sort of the rules for disclosures are already there in parts of the world, and soon to be coming to our neck of the woods in Canada. And perhaps most importantly, I would say society at large has been a huge catalyst here. Social purpose has been shown to drive consumer purchasing decisions. And so, efforts to improve the healthiness and or the environmental and social footprint of products can set organizations apart from the competition and make them more appealing to the environmentally conscious consumer. So to answer the question, I think it's a confluence of all of these interests that has really placed us at the top of many agendas of the corporate world, and certainly in the boardrooms and on the finance leaders' agenda.
Jaiden, do you want to add?
Yeah, I would love to just go back and talk about what's driving those stakeholder, increasing awareness from stakeholders. I think on a very fundamental level, unfortunately, a lot of the time we're not aware of problems, or we don't become concerned with problems on a really deep level until it's something that impacts us. And I think we're really starting to see, I'll use the E for example, the environment. We're really starting to see these impacts in our everyday life. I'm sure you all heard about the wildfires this summer. That is like directly tied back to the impacts of climate change, and that the prominence of these natural disasters are only going to continue to increase. And I think that situations such as those are really bringing this awareness to the front of our minds and growing, okay, like we've known this is a problem, but now we're actually seeing this as a problem, and we don't have another option. We have to start making these improvements.
That's great. I'm going to turn to the question that Laura asked in the chat. And she asked, are there courses being offered at university now that help future students further understand these topics and sustainability and how it specifically relates to finance? And this is a little bit of a setup question. I don't think Laura realized that. The University of Waterloo has a unique program, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I'm going to ask this question in two parts. One, from a University of Waterloo perspective, and then more broadly, for both of you, what are you seeing in other spaces that are, from an educational perspective, that are out there?
Okay, I think I'm gonna just jump in. I can definitely talk about the University of Waterloo perspective. So my program is actually sustainability and financial management. This is the third year it's been running. And the fundamental focus of the program is integrating these considerations between sustainability and financial management, hence the name. But I think from my perspective, what makes it really different from other programs that are maybe finance with adding on some sustainability classes or a sustainability minor, for example, is the level of integration that we're really focusing on at every level of our course. So for example, we took, even in our first semester, we took a course called SFM 101, and it just already started to introduce us to these ESG sustainability considerations that corporations are looking at. And as we move throughout the course, like I'm really excited for a class we're taking in the third year, for example, that looks at social reporting. So it's looking at how you can report on, for example, diversity metrics within a company. And I think I do have to promote my program a little bit. I do think it's such an amazing opportunity, and it's something that I'm really excited about, just for the way that information is taught and the level of integration between these environmental, social, and financial considerations.
Yeah, and I think more broadly, what I'm seeing from an employer perspective is a bit of a race to build in our educational institutions sort of these skill sets that maybe are a bit scarce today, um, that traditionally have not been associated with the finance professional. It's we've typically trained up finance professionals with financial reporting and accounting technical knowledge, and a lot of the capability has been focused on historical reporting and less so some of the elements that Jaiden just mentioned. And so I see a bit of a race to develop and curate programs that help to develop well-rounded students and finance professionals that really address some of those some of those gaps. So things like qualitative and quantitative scenario analysis, data science is going to be incredibly important. Impact investing, and of course, sort of the baseline reporting and disclosure the deliverables. And I mentioned up front too, telling sort of like that story is really important. And so it's just a more well-rounded finance professional, and it's going to require upskilling, right? And I think the educational institutions understand that and are adapting, and sort of Waterloo has certainly led the charge there in my mind, based on what I'm seeing from an employer perspective across the other universities.
Thank you.
I would just
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Jaden.
would actually just love to add something real quick before we head on to the next question. I just thought this was worth mentioning because this was definitely a concern that was going through my head as I was in the university program. So we keep saying this is an emerging space, and there's a lot of opportunities, but it's one thing to say, oh, there's this program available. It's another to actually find that there are jobs available and there actually are opportunities within this space. So I just love to add from my perspective, it's been really cool just to see the level of interest from companies once they find out about this program and they find out that there's students studying in this program. So everyone in my year is headed to our first co-op in January. And it's been honestly a really fun application process just because there's so many different opportunities within the world of sustainable finance. And there's just so much appreciation for the type of education that we're receiving. Even going beyond that, I was actually lucky enough to work at Deloitte this summer for an internship after just my first year, partly due just thanks to the unique education that the program provides. So I did just want to mention that as y'all are looking towards university courses after high school, there is demand for this emerging space.
I won't.
Just to put a
Go
finer
ahead.
point
Yeah.
on it, there is way more demand in the corporate world, not just in the advisory space that I operate in, but across all industries for this skill set than there is supply right now. And so when I say there's scarcity of skill sets in this area, I truly do mean it. Every organization is chomping at the bit to bring on and onboard talent that brings this skill set to the table.
So I'm gonna let me answer one question from Amal that asks, are there courses dedicated to this for the accounting program at Waterloo? And I'll add a piece to this conversation. Then there's a couple of great questions that'll follow on what you just said, Brandon. University of Waterloo, actually, what Jaden's talking about, the SFM program, we joined with the faculties of environment and the faculty of accounting and finance. And this SFM program is a joint program between the two. And so the sustainability topics are taught by faculty of environment. So they're in that specific area and been in that area for a long time. And then the accounting and finance is taught from the accounting and finance and takes the CPA path as well. And so I'll stop there because this isn't the conversation about our program. But I just to answer that question directly. So there's a couple of questions all related to that employment that you were just talking about, Brandon, and they where are the will there be jobs dedicated to sustainability in business? What are some of the companies, industries that may be on the rise with new emphasis on sustainability? What changes in your workplace have you seen in the past years related to ESG? So, generally, where do you see these new and exciting jobs and changes in the industry related to this new emerging space?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's almost akin, sort of to asking which industries are going to be affected by ESG reporting requirements. And my view is that sort of the demand for those skill sets is largely industry agnostic. So it's across the board based on what I'm seeing. Having said that, organizations in the financial services space, energy resources and industrials and consumer business, they all will be greatly impacted by upcoming reporting requirements. And so all those organizations in those industries are really, clamoring to build up capabilities and skill sets. And it's an exercise of readiness right now in the underlying sort of, processes and controls that will support this, these requirements. And of course, be remiss if I didn't mention professional services organizations like ours that sort of serve clients and in those industries and others and advise them along their journey to readiness in this area. So it's really across the board. This is so pervasive that there will be opportunities, really in every industry because every industry is going to be touched by the reporting requirements, and even beyond the reporting requirements, just the focus on responsible ESG related impact is something that is going to touch every organization out there. We talk about corporate purpose and the impact that society is having on driving a lot of this change. There isn't any organization that will be immune to that, right? And the linkage between ESG and value creation, that's something that everyone needs to get on board with.
Jaiden, do you want to add what kind of, you had talked about co-op positions with the students right now. What kind of companies are besides obviously professional services, but what other companies and areas are you seeing?
I think, yeah, I would love, I think the really cool thing about this space is just how many different opportunities there was. So I kind of had in my mind when I was headed into the program, it's, oh, I'll get a job in sustainability. But what didn't occur to me is within like environmental, social, and governance, just how many different pathways there are depending on what our interests are. So even just talking to, like I said, my peers who all have co-op jobs lined up for January, like there's people going to work at the Big Four, there's people going to work in specific industry companies to help them with their like sustainability teams in particular. There's people going to work with the government. I have some students going to work with more on like more environmental sides in terms of like measuring different types of environmental emissions. So there's just such a broad range of jobs available that really allows us to follow along the pathway that we're interested in. And I think that's really cool.
For those of you who don't know, the Big Four, the four largest professional services firms in the audit space. Separate question from Cardinal. Would it be plausible for governments to start offering more incentives to venture opportunities on the forefront of sustainability? In other words, maybe ask it slightly differently. What are governments doing to sort of push this, and what are you seeing, for opportunities out of that?
Yeah, I think in Canada they're really setting the mark for what responsible, ESG practices look like, more in terms of, things like a commitment to be, net zero, right? Like Canada has pledged to do, and that's sort of now laying the foundation for organizations to contribute to that mandate, within what is really a relatively short time frame. And so, by starting there and leading by example in terms of the aspirations, governments are really, drawing that line in the sand and saying, listen, we're not going to get here unless the corporate world is actively developing strategies, to align with that and to help support that. right? And I sort of I talked about linking back to value creation, the ingredients and impacting sort of our global economy, and in countries like Canada, is every organization can't take superficial action. They've really got to commit to do it because it drives shareholder stakeholder value, but also it's just the right thing to do, and it's obviously aligned with sort of these bold aspirational goals like Canada has put down recently. So I think to answer the question more acutely, they've got to set the big picture aspiration that organizations in the corporate can now follow and align their strategies with.
How do companies balance the environmental responsibility and financial profitability? I mean, Jaiden, maybe you can take this because you've been on that, or Brandon, either one.
I guess I'll start off, and Brandon, I'll let you hop in.
Sure.
That is a great question, and I think that's something that a lot of companies are really looking at, because I think there is sort of this idea that in order to be environmentally or socially responsible, your your revenue is going to take a hit, and so it's kind of this idea of it, you have to choose either or. And although I think there are examples where that is the case, I think there's a lot of times where that is not the case, especially as we see moving forward. A lot of stakeholders, a lot of customers, they want to see companies demonstrate a commitment to ESG. And if companies aren't able to do that, that is when they're going to see this negative impact.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually say it's less about being a balance and more about this is now a net new element of how performance and effectiveness is evaluated. And so the role of the finance leader has expanded. And so, this is something that is not going away. And this is why I stress the point that value creation and effective ESG strategies that are meaningful and not superficial are one and the same. And so less about balance and more about appreciating the value that's created when you get this right. And getting this right is non-negotiable. And so the role of the finance leader just got a heck of a lot more complicated, but also rewarding.
I think it's also, I would love to just add, a lot of the times we're thinking about business growth and thinking about growth in the long run, fundamentally, without looking, particularly, again, I'm focusing on the environmental side here, without looking at environmental responsibility, you're not going to have growth in the long run, because so much of business operations relies on our natural systems that if we continue on our current trajectory, at a certain point, it's not going to work anymore.
And this is where the innovative organizations will thrive.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I'm trying to decide which ones to pick. So uh, maybe I'll ask this because I know we're running out of time, and this one's a little more actionable. How can schools, particularly at the secondary high school level, incorporate sustainability topics into their curriculums? Like what can they do to supercharge their students and get them ready for this conversation as they move into the university setting and past? What can they do now?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is, as I mentioned, a lot of the accounting and business courses I took in high school, they were amazing, but it was very profit focused. And I think those types of business courses provide such an amazing opportunity to introduce students to these considerations and have them start thinking about this even before they head into these post-secondary programs. So I think that's the big one for me that comes to mind.
Yeah, I would have a similar talk track in terms of doing something similar to the school, obviously on a school of accounting and finance, obviously on a smaller scale, but really integrating some of these environmental considerations into the core business curriculum. It doesn't have to be incredibly deep, but it sort of gets students thinking about the linkages between the two, and it not just being about the profits like Jaiden mentions, but also the impact on the environment. And so I think that would be sufficient at the high school level to start to tweak students to that linkage.
That's great. I know we have a hard end at 11 o'clock, so maybe, and we're at 11:59 now, or at 10:59 now. So maybe I'll just leave it open if you have any final thoughts that you want to give to the group. And an apology to those that we didn't get to their specific questions. You're more than welcome to send emails to myself, and I can forward it to either Brandon or Jaden, or get in contact with somebody who might be able to help with that. But I'll open it up for final thoughts, as I know we're winding up out of time.
Sure. Yeah. Well, this has been fun, and I always say, you know, change is fun, and this represents an absolutely massive change. And anytime you've got disruption on this scale, it's going to impact organizations, as I said, in every industry across the globe, and that's going to create an incredible amount of opportunities and new and exciting roles, you know, for sort of this next generation of finance professionals. You know, you can make entire careers out of this with a focus on sustainable finance, and so that's incredibly exciting. And I think the future is bright. Everyone should be really encouraged about the, you know, the multitude of opportunities that they have sort of in front of them. I'd sort of leave everyone with an encouraging note like that.